And other trends are two of our regular market analysts, Walt Hagney and Doug Jackson. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Hi, Mark.
Doug, let's move over to this corn market. It's being harvested right now. Anecdotally, it sounds like an awfully good crop out there.
Mark, we had a well-followed private analyst, of course, about a week ago suggest the national yield about 7 bushels an acre better than the government's last estimate in September. And there's enough anecdotal reports of record yields, fabulous yields far beyond anybody's imagination that the industry is not willing to discount the possibility that private analyst, has essentially got the essence of this thing right. We'll be putting out some crop estimates later next week, as will other privates, and then we'll go into the government report on the 12th. But the market's already anticipating and factoring in the prospects of a bigger number, and the question is simply just how big. Corn's cheap, however, versus any kind of historical standard. The world supply-demand situation is not that oversupplied. We needed this kind of a record crop to stabilize and rebuild inventories slightly. But the prospects, amazingly, after knowing that we had a record demand, that we needed a record crop, it looks like, in fact, we've got that. And we may be in a 10-cent trading range all winter and into spring, Mark, and a situation that's far different than what could have been a possibility if we'd had any kind of a weather problem, but it looks like we needed a record year and we've got it.
All right. We're in that kind of a trading range. What do you recommend right now? LDPs are pretty fat. Should you take advantage of that now than sit on the corn?
A lot of people will do that, Mark, try to pick a bottom in this market. And when we see basis recovery after harvest that helps narrow that LDP, that's okay, but it's not going to be a get-rich strategy. And really, for those that suspect that this thing could be a lot bigger, historically, we don't find that revelation. We didn't find it in 94. We didn't find it in 92. We don't get that full crop number until November. People might want to delay a little bit, at least get the October crop report under our belt and see what we're really dealing with here.
In terms of the soybean market, we saw some pressure there. It backed off some. Concern about frost. Talk about that. How concerned are you about these cold temperatures overnight in the northern fringes of the Corn Belt?
It looks like we're going to get a frost sometime between Saturday and next Tuesday. A frost date that's going to be a few days later than a normal frost date. We needed a warm September. We got it. The market doesn't think we're going to have a major problem or impact, and yet we'd estimate that potentially 800 million bushels of corn and maybe 200 million bushels of beans are not mature as of this weekend's frost. Could you lose 10%? Could you lose 20%? We're going to be guessing this all the way into winter. And yet again, with the private analysts suggesting a much larger crop, right now the market doesn't think the frost damage is going to be that significant.
All right, sales strategies on soybeans?
Mark, we think the downside potential is still substantial. We've had 3 instances since 1999 when we've traded well below $5. 2 of those instances were less bearish than what we think this year will be. If we have a 40 yield or better, which we think is very reasonable, the carryout's going to be 300 to 350 million. You put a 3 in front of the carryout in the United States, the marketing loan program, and we can go right back to the 430, 450 kind of futures prices that we saw in 2001 and 2002. You've got a possibility that Western Hemisphere production will be up 35 million tons. Demand only goes up 10 million tons a year. It doesn't take much analysis there to see that we could rebuild these oilseed supplies dramatically. The North American and South American farmer has sold nothing ahead. We've got the potential here for substantial additional downside. So if you think the yield is above 40 bushels an acre, we might still make some sales now and expect to pick up a much, much bigger LDP payment later on. Those that are forecasting these much higher prices, we can't imagine what they're thinking unless you're simply going for the possibility of a catastrophic drought in South America. Anything's possible, but I think you're betting against the odds with the potential that there's a lot more downside from where we are even today. We're going to trade well below longer term.
Real quick, wheat market under some pressure this week.
The big surprise this week in the stocks and wheat production number was the spring wheat crop is about 40 million bushels bigger, a record spring wheat crop despite all the cold, wet maladies that apparently we had. So even though we've got some problems with a late wet crop in Canada with quality problems, it's just the U.S. crop's just going to add to carry out. There's probably 30, 40 cents downside in the deferred wheat futures. We've got a carry out that's probably above 600 million in the U.S., a huge crop in Europe. So wheat probably loses the corn and drifts lower long term.
Excellent. All right, Doug, thank you so much. Let's go over and talk